Welcome to another conversation, the Black Male Impact. Today, we have with us Mr. Christopher Crater. My name is Richard A. Cross, and we're going to dive deep into some conversation and see how well we can inspire positive change. But before we get into the questions, I'm going to ask Mr. Crater to share with us something about him and some of the things that he has been doing over the years. Mr. Crater, welcome.
Dr. Cross, thank you so much, sir, for having me. I send greetings on behalf of Chicago and the My Brother's Keeper Alliance in Chicago. So again, my name is Chris Crater. I'm the Senior Associate for My Brother's Keeper Alliance at the Obama Foundation. I work specifically with non-for-profit schools, faith-based organizations, violence interrupters that are all doing the work of supporting boys and young men of color in Chicago. Prior to that, I was an educator at an all-boys school, really working to only shine a light on the brilliance of Black and brown boys, but working on that trajectory to make sure that we push them to and through college. So that's actually where I met Dr. Cross, and just extremely grateful for the work that you do, and just happy to be here tonight.
Oh, man, thank you, man. I really appreciate what you're doing, and I know the students and the young men that you've been working with really appreciate it too, your dedication and your commitment to progress and growth within our community. It's admirable. So thanks for being here. So we're just going to get straight into the conversation. So my first question to you is, what is the mindset that it takes to make a positive impact?
My Lord. Well, somebody told me a long time ago, it's hard to be what you can't see. So I think it's a few things, right? It's that grounding moment where we really have to look in the mirror and think through what were some things that supported us getting to where we are? What are some gaps that were left behind? And if we did have those supports, why was it so important? Why was it so influential? I really think right now to have a mindset of positive impact, it really allows us to have an opportunity to look in the mirror, right? To think about how we show up authentically as ourselves, and also to hold us accountable to knowing that regardless of whether we are the CEO or whether we're behind the scenes, somebody is watching us and somebody is paying attention. And it's very important the way we show up authentically as ourselves, but also that we show up as our best self. So again, that's consistency, that's groundfulness, that's honesty, right? To be able to say, like, also I would say it's not a quick fix either, right? Having that positive impact is not something you necessarily get to reap the benefits of overnight, right? It's not something that you can just walk into a room and the next day everybody buys in, but it's a lifestyle. And I'm just so grateful that I've had so many strong Black and brown men in my life to lead me and guide me, to show me, because I definitely was watching. I might have not reached out to them or said anything to them first, but I was watching the way they moved, the way they showed up, the way they spoke, and also even in the moments of uncertainty, right? The fact that they were able to be vulnerable as well. So,
well, and thanks for sharing that, especially as close off with saying being vulnerable, because we have to be open-minded. We have to realize that we may not get the change we want overnight, but to show up as our authentic self and just know that someone is watching us, and how important it is for us to do the best we can, because the next person who wants to realize what's possible may just there looking to see through us what they can accomplish. So it's important that we know that the change we want may not happen overnight, and that the next generation is always watching, or someone is always watching. So that's important.
Absolutely.
But I know you said you were an educator. Well, you're always an educator because you still, you may not be in the classroom right now, you're still teaching. But what was a important takeaway from that experience before you make the transition?
For one, again, knowing that I had the little brothers watching, right?
Yes.
I think sometimes we can get complacent. Sometimes we can be fearful to take that next leap. But I know I have so many strong Black and brown young men that look up to me, and
Yeah.
I had to let them know that regardless of whether fear or whether I didn't think I belonged or I might not have gotten it, I needed to let them know that it's okay sometimes to move on. It's okay to elevate, right? We're not happy with where we are. We have to keep going. We have to keep elevating. We have to want more for ourselves. So after having a deep conversation with them, I actually asked my students, like, do you guys think I should apply for this? Because I was so committed to them at the time. They were juniors.
Yeah.
And I didn't necessarily want to leave my young men that I've been with since they were 14. But they told me, they were like, man, if you have an opportunity, to have a seat at the table, we just want to make sure that you let them know what our experiences are, right? That you let these lived experiences live through you. And, with that, I felt like I had to take that leap. Also, to know that it's okay to make mistakes as well, right? I didn't have everything figured out, but I knew that I wanted to make an impact, and I wanted to. And the change starts with you. Sometimes I think sometimes we think on a big scale, right? If
Yeah.
we're not impacting 15,000 people, did we really make an impact? And it literally just starts with one, right? Like it's the small things that make the big mountains move. And once I took a step back, really locked in with what I could do and let my young men know that I got them. But I want them to see me in that light so they know that they can go there and go farther.
And I was listening for that part because I think that's important. Sometimes, although you didn't want to take that opportunity, but it was a great opportunity, but just by you taking that leap or that step forward, you now give them an opportunity to see themselves further
Absolutely.
than they are. Because as you start off with the conversation, you said it's easier to be what you see. So stepping in that role, give them something else to vision themselves doing. And that's how life is. Sometimes, as you said, we have to take that leap forward for somebody else to see what is possible. So that is great for the young men to see someone like them, someone from their community stepping into a bigger role, to give them hope of what is possible for them. So that's really important in making a difference. So my next question to you, what advice do you have for the men listening on how they can play a role in creating positive change?
That's a that's a great question. I think a few things. One, I think we have to be vulnerable enough to be able to tell our stories
Yeah.
and to be able to tell the whole story, right? Because after talking to so many Black and brown boys and young men, a lot of times, they see Dr. Cross in this amazing suit, right? They hear doctor, right? And they think this just happened like that, right? And how could you ever relate to me, right? Because you look the way you look.
Yeah.
And I think sometimes we have to be able to not only tell our stories, but also tell some of the things that didn't go as well, right? Some of the struggles that we've had along the way, and also how we were able to transition through some of those things. Also, I think one of the biggest components of that too, when we figure out something that works, when we
Yeah.
find out like something that works well, we can no longer hoard it. We have to share our resources. We have to share our networks. We have to connect our little brothers, right? We have to pour into them. We can no longer hold the information for ourselves.
And that is important because so one person had said we have to lift as we climb. So as soon as we gain insight, gain knowledge, our next responsibility should be to share it with the next generation, so they too can get out of their situation to also tap into their own greatness and get piece of the experience, the growth. But you also said, and I had the conversation with some students earlier today, and I was there talking. And the moment I share my backstory, where I started, the hardship, man, you should see the look on their face. They couldn't believe. So you're right.
Absolutely.
We have to not only tell them what is possible, but also tell them our own challenges. So that is important in regards to helping them to see possibilities, because if they think we didn't experience what they experienced, they may think what you're saying don't make sense because you didn't go through what I'm going through. So how am I going to relate to you? So it's important to share our own all our stories, all parts of it, the hardships, the good parts, and the not so good parts.
Yeah.
So I want to ask you another question. How can we, as Black men, help to change the narrative today? And you can talk about it from any perspective, from whatever you see in Chicago or whatever is going on in different states. But what can we do to change the narrative today?
Absolutely. So let me be very clear that I think Black men are already doing it, right?
Yeah.
We have so many powerful Black and brown men showing up in so many spaces authentically as themselves, and not just satisfied with that, but also clearing the path so there could be another young man or young lady that want to come after. So I will say that the process is already started, right? We are in all types of different jobs and different sports and all across. I think we just have to continue to highlight, shine a light on our younger brothers. I think we have to pour into them. I think we need to mentor them. And also, I think we need to learn from them too. I think we can show up our best self when we pour into our young men that are behind us and that are with us. And I think what's so powerful about these boys and young men of color, they're very vocal about what they want, about what doesn't work, and about what does work. So when we think about spaces for them, when we think about panels talking about our young men, we got to include them because they're not quite like us where we had to kind of just what mama says goes or what dad says goes, what grandma says goes. Man, they are very articulate and they're very like passionate about what they need and what they're not getting. So I think we can show up authentically as our best self when we make sure that our boys and young men of color know that they are supported, that they are loved, and that they're more than enough, not just when they go off and get that doctorate degree or when they get that accounting degree. They are much more than our future. They are present. They're important right now. And I think as we continue to pour into them and let them know that, I think the Black man will shine even brighter than we're already shining.
I think that is important. Let them know that they are valued now, and because that will help to build their confidence. And with confidence, it will make them feel unstoppable and will be able to share their own light with the world. And as you said, man, not wait until they achieve certain things. Right now, they're valued right now, and that's important. So we have to make sure we're encouraging the next generation of young men, make them feel confident, make them feel as if they matter, because that's important now. So they can grow feeling as if they are valuable and they're important to our society, because we know that there are some labels and stigmas that they may still have to grapple with. So the more we encourage them, the more it will be, or better it will be for them as we go forward in creating a change society.
Absolutely.
Yes, sir. So this question is really important, I believe, because as we make a difference, there are things that push us in those positions that we take on. So what or who has influenced or inspired you to pursue the path you're on?
Absolutely. Wow. When I think about that, two people stand out. One would be Daryl Crater, who's my uncle. My uncle, he started a mentoring program called the Big Brother Mentor Program, probably about like 29 years ago. And I used to go to his house every weekend as a young man. And on Saturdays, he would mentor all these Black boys on the South and West Side. And my uncle had a wife. I have cousins, right? He had a family, a job, but he still was so intentional about making sure every weekend for 20 plus years that he poured into these Black and brown boys every Saturday. And sometimes I didn't want to go, and sometimes I just didn't understand what was the commitment, right? I'm like, man, Uncle, it's raining outside. We got to go this Saturday. And he like, yeah, we got to go, right? Because he knew if even if it was only one young man showed up, right, he'd get to pour into that young man. He'd get to hear that young man. He'd get to see that young man. And I did that program for about 6, 7 years. And it's so funny when I look up now, I'm like, wow, that I wonder, is that why I go so hard at advocating for our boys and young men of color? Because I think I got to see it, right?
Yeah.
Also, as being a 34-year-old young man in Chicago, so many of my classmates are not here, right? That should be for several reasons, whether it was, the judicial system or whether they were shot and killed. Being 30 should not be the highlight of life, or just graduating from high school be the highlight of life, right? Like there is so much more life to live. And I'm just so grateful that, my uncle poured into me. And also, too, when I think about going to my historical Black college, shout out to the Mississippi Valley State University. I'll never forget. So I had to go to a summer program to get admitted, and I did not want to be there. Right, I'm a kid from Chicago. I'm at the intersection of imposter syndrome slash. It's like imposter syndrome meets like I can't even describe how angry I was. The fact that I'm here getting this education and I have all my friends back home not able to get it. Right, how dare me go have this luxury life? And I know a lot of our young men go through that too, right? That imposter syndrome, but also that guilt, right? I had a Black man professor, Mr. G, right? He poured into me, and he was the first Black man to ever stand up to me and to tell me, like, yo, I don't care what you do in everybody else's class, but when you come in here, right, you're going to sit down and you're going to learn. And I see something in you that you don't see in yourself. And I remember we got into it really bad. I think it might have been the third or fourth week of the summer program. And I remember going back to my room crying because I was so angry at him for not letting me fail, right?
Yeah.
And I asked him, like, man, why do you care so much? And he was like, man, because I see something in you you don't see in yourself. So if you want to act crazy, you won't be able to do it here. And ultimately, he became one of my biggest mentors. Didn't know that was my fraternity brother later on in life. And I always tell him, like, man, you have no idea how not only seeing you, but also hearing from you and you applying some pressure on me impacted and changed my life. So I would say them two brothers were the early lights that really shine bright on me.
Two things. Well, there's a lot of things that you shared in talking about those two gentlemen. The commitment of your uncle with the desire to make a difference. Yeah. And that's how we create change. That we have the desire, but we have to commit to that desire to make a difference. It doesn't matter what's going on around us. If we're going to see change within our community, we have to commit to what we see and believe will make a difference. And next thing with the professor in college, his concern, but not only the concern, but his belief in you. Because sometimes for us to be who we are capable of becoming, somebody have to believe in us before we even believe in ourselves. And now it's our turn. And I hope the listeners are listening. Sometimes we have to help someone to believe in themselves before they believe in themselves.
Come on.
Because now we are at this point in our journey. We know we didn't get here by ourselves. Somebody saw something. And it doesn't matter what you say or what you do, I'm not going to let you give up on yourself, even if you don't know who you can become. And sometimes that's how we're going to create the change we want, by being the example, of course, but pour life into our young men. Because if they're coming from an environment where no one talks life into them, no one's encouraging them.
Come on.
They may not see their possibility.
Absolutely. I mean, that's what it is. That survivor's remorse and just not thinking I belong there is a pivotal piece that I think a lot of our young men deal with, and just Black men in general deal with, right? The fact that we made it out.
Yeah.
So always humbled to talk to my guys, but to think that those two Black men played a huge role in where I'm at today.
Man, that's important. We have to decide to play a role in the change we want to see. And as you said, pivotal moment, which I'm going to get to that in a minute, but I want to ask this question. What is your perspective on the current climate of Black men in society today? I know you mentioned earlier that we are making a difference, but still, because it is still obvious that there's still work to do. So what is your perspective on the current climate of Black men in society today?
So I think we're at a pivotal point right now where we might be seen and heard a little more than maybe we've ever been seen or heard. And how do we take that moment to be able to leverage that opportunity to enlighten, but also to bring up all of young black and brown boys and men who are not feeling seen or heard. I think this is an opportunity for us to reach back. When we think about our boys and young men of color, a lot of people would say there is a hopelessness that they've never seen before, right? A lot of our young men might not necessarily feel like their life is worthy or that they matter. So a lot of the times when we see some of the small acts they do, right? Like I got into an argument. Let me end it right here, right? It escalates quickly because the trajectory of my life, I don't necessarily see that. But I see some brilliant black and brown young men that are eager for support, right? I think the climate of black men right now is that we are being called on now more than ever, right? To speak out, to share our stories, to be vulnerable enough to bend down to help our young men and to meet them where they are, right? Some of our young men are not currently there, right? Some of them are maybe are not in the classroom, are not in the boardroom. But how do we take this pivotal moment and meet them where they are and to share with them about our best practices, but also to listen to them, right? We have so many powerful black and brown young men and boys that are seeking brotherhood, that are seeking support, that are seeking attention right now, and they are literally asking for help. And it looks different in different spaces, but there is so much potential. I think the climate right now, it's a sense of urgency, but it's also a powerful moment of embrace and also an opportunity for us to learn and examine how we support and show up as our best self in that process. So I think it's an exciting time. Obviously, yes, we are struggling. There's a lot of things going on. Here in Chicago, obviously, what they say on the news every week, or but I know the real though, right? There are so many people committed to helping change the narrative of our boys and young men of color, not only in Chicago but across the country. That sometimes lose sleep trying to figure out, how can I engage my young men? How can we scale up and get more young men involved? So there is a want and a need for more Black men to be involved. And we're excited about the opportunity that this moment presents because it's time. It's going to take everybody's perspective, everybody's expertise
Yeah,
to come to the table and figure out how we can help change this trajectory.
man, that important that we do come together because it's now one person's effort. It's going to take all of us, and different perspective matter as we go forward in creating a change for the next generation. But as you bring up Chicago and what's going on, and some of the things that people have been saying about Chicago, and being that we have some young men who hold on to those negative labels based on their community or based on the past, how do you reach those young men who sometimes cannot see themselves beyond the labels of their community?
So, it's so funny because I think of myself, right? Like I feel like I took so many bags of laundry and different luggage with me to Mississippi Valley State, right? Because I felt like I took the burden of Chicago on my back, right? And it wasn't until I got out of Chicago that when I heard somebody speak bad about Chicago, that I was like, hold on, it's not like that, right? Now, I'm the main person, like, yeah, we from Chicago, it's big, it's bad. So, for one, I think it presents an opportunity for a deeper conversation about what is it so significant about your neighborhood, right? What is so significant about the block that you come from, about your friends that you think you might be leaving behind, right? Like that survivor's remorse, that imposter syndrome, but also those stories too, right? Like for a lot of our young men, that was shelter, that's family, right? Coming from these particular neighborhoods. And I understand, I'm from the west side of Chicago. I wear it proud. I don't think I would be, well, I know I wouldn't be the person I am without that experience. But it is an opportunity for us to really take a deep dive with our young people to really talk about what is it about the imagery that you like so much, right? I think we're in a state now where our young men will tell us like why it's so important. I had an opportunity to just take a few young men to London over the summer, and a lot of our guys, they love the drill music, they listen to the rap. But when we got to London, they met a lot of young men their age, and the first thing they asked them about was like, "Man, this is Chirac, right?"
Yeah.
You know, and it threw my guys off a little bit
Yeah.
because they were like, "Well, yeah, we have our issues in Chicago, but man, we got so many other dope things too." And I think it didn't really click to them until they heard somebody from across the world ask them about it.
Yeah.
And I think because of that, initial conversation, I think now they're a little more careful about what they post and what images they put out, right?
Yeah.
And that only happened because of dialogue, having conversation, right? We have to hear our young people and understand where they're coming from.
Well, and the exposure give them perspective,
Come on,
and with your experience that you, yes, you were also, I'm from Chicago, but once they started to talk just negative about Chicago, you decide that I'm going to like show you that it's not only negative. And sometimes that's what we have to do from our community, from where we're from. We have to decide to be that example because yes, there are already different connotations that associated with where you're from. But are you going to just live it out that way? Are you going to make a difference so others from that same space can see a possibility through you? And I think that's powerful. And it may not be highlighted enough, the power or the impact, just one person coming out of a community that no one thought
come
anyone
on,
from this block going to be successful. Someone from this block will graduate from college. Someone from this block will take care of their family. That's powerful. But sometimes those are not the things that get highlighted. It's just the same old negative things that they're accustomed to. And even though there are other success happening in the community. So I know with you taking the stance to say, man, this is not what come from where I'm from. But
absolutely.
I'm not going to just tell you, I'm going to show you because that's important once we decide to make a difference.
And I'll be honest with you, Dr. Cross, the best part of the exchange was bringing the London students to Chicago and
Wow.
letting them walk in the Bud Billiken parade, letting them meet some of our community members and neighbors, and and they had a completely different view. Like, man, Chicago is so dope. It's so diverse. People are nice, right? Like it was one of those situations where it was exciting to be able to enlighten because a lot of times we just don't know, right? So I think it really impacted our young men. But again, I think it let them know that they play a role in the way we're perceived too, right? So they have to be careful the way they show up, what they post, because they know folks are watching. So just grateful that they have that experience. But you said something pivotal though, right? Exposure, but
Yes.
also access, right? We need them both, right?
Yes.
Exposure is huge, but we
Yes.
need to be able to plug them in directly to
Correct.
resources, right?
Yes,
So
sir.
exposure coupled with access, man, we cooking with grease.
Man, that is powerful because you're right. The access is important because they can see what's available.
Come
But
on,
they need to
come on,
be put into those spaces to experience it. They need to experience the exposure and experience the resources that's available because that gives them a different drive,
absolutely.
to better themselves. So I think with the exposure and the experience, these young men will be more than what society labels them at times. So, but I want to continue with the question that I have for you. So, what change do you want to see in general and amongst Black men?
So I think again, I know I alluded to it a little bit. For one, us being vulnerable enough to tell our stories,
Yes.
the complete story, right? Not just the good parts. Also, us being able to not hoard all the great information and lessons that we've learned, that we share them, but ultimately that we are okay with not being okay sometimes. I accredit 2020 to being really powerful in my life I was 13 when my mother passed, and there was a lot of anger that came out of that, right? But it was a pivotal moment in life because it said, I have to be a man now, right? So no crying. So I was really put in a position to make everybody else laugh. But the entire time I was super depressed. That anger eventually started to seep out, right? And I started to push away all the people that were valuable or important to me. And it wasn't until 2020, until getting a therapist, right, that I figured out, wow, I need to talk to somebody, right? And since that time, man, I have joined a black male yoga group in Chicago called the Healing Shop. Right, these are some brothers that don't know nothing about yoga, but have committed to showing up authentically their best self for their family. So they leave it all on the mat out there, right? So for us to know that we don't have to always have it together, and that we support each other, right? That we call our brothers, that we check in and we really check in, right? That we go see each other, that we connect. Folks that we've been, thinking about connecting with or reaching out to, I really ask that we do that now because life is so short, man, and we just don't know. But I think if we can continue to do those things, right, show up as who we are, share those best practices, be vulnerable enough to tell the entire story, and be okay with not being okay all the time, I think we're gonna be all right.
And as you said, we need to be okay with not being okay, and be our authentic self. But one thing that I've noticed, and I used to be there too, because this is how we grew up, not asking for help. What are some of the challenge you see, especially working with young men? Do you find that they have a hard time asking for help? And what do you think is the cause for not asking for help?
So two things. One, I think they're very good at it. I think it just looks different, right?
Okay.
Whether it is masked in writing, or whether it's masked in rap lyrics, or it's masked in drawing, or in poetry, right? Like our young people are finding ways, even in the content that they post on social media, right? Like we have so many brilliant black and brown young men that can make content, that can edit it, that can, like, they have found their lane and what they're good at, whether it's gaming or software. Or I think the connection to expressing, like, hey, I need help, or hey, this is what I'm feeling. Can you support me? I think they have to know that those resources exist, right? And I know mental health was a big thing in 2020. Obviously, a lot of people are talking about it, but also that they have someone that looks like them, that's connected to them, that they can feel like they can talk to, or at least have a conversation with about it, right? Because I can't necessarily feel comfortable pulling up to a stranger if I don't necessarily feel comfortable pulling up to somebody in my circle that I haven't talked to before. So just to knowing, if our young people know that those resources are available, I think it creates a safe space to be able to have that dialogue and conversation.
Okay.
So again, and I know the barbershop for years has been that sacred space for me to vent and to learn best practices, to share. And I just think now we just need to create more spaces where our black and brown men can feel supported and connected to other brothers that are going through the same things. So, so yeah, it's tough, but I think a lot of times it's going to require us to take a deeper dive and to really dialogue with our young people to find out, what are your interests, what are your fears,
Okay.
what's not working, what is working, and why do you feel like that, right? Because they're a little more vocal than we are.
Well, yes, I find that once you give them, create a platform, they will share. And I wanted to just maybe ask a bit about mentorship, because that's what you alluded to, having that space where they feel comfortable on sharing. So I know that's a lot of what you do with mentoring, but give me one thing that you see as valuable when it comes to mentoring.
And I would have to say consistency is probably one of the biggest ones, right? There's a lot of people who show up and come into our young people's lives, right? A lot of them are there for a season. And, young people they are very apprehensive, right? Like, oh, okay, let's see what Mr. Craig is talking about today, right? How long does he stay, right? Is he committed? Now, again, obviously, mentorship can look like several different things because obviously we know people have families and careers, and you don't have necessarily all day for wraparound support. But when you show up to support a boy or young man of color, are you showing up to support them? Right? Are you connecting them to resources? Are you listening to them? And also, too, besides consistency, it has to be trust, right? I have to really believe that you have my best interest at heart, or that you're going to support what I want to do, right? Even if it doesn't look like necessarily your vision.
Yes.
So again, trust, consistency, and time,
Yeah.
right? It takes time. As a black male professor, I know them first few weeks they put you through the ringer, brother, because they put me through it. Like,
Oh yes. Oh yes.
let's see how long he lasts, right?
Oh yeah, because they're testing you to see
Absolutely.
if you're really there for them
Absolutely.
and not just to be at work.
Come
Because
on.
they have experienced so much disappointment, so they want to know if are you the real deal? Are you going to stick around to pour into us? So that's important. But before I ask the last question, I want to ask where can the listeners find you and help support the work that you are doing to make a difference?
Absolutely. So it's Christopher Crater, Crater, on LinkedIn and on Facebook. It's the Nuke underscore educator on Instagram. And of course, you can go on Obama.org to My Brother's Keeper Alliance. And again, whether you're in Chicago or across the country, NBK has 200 plus communities, including Puerto Rico. So there's a space, there's an opportunity, there's a community close to you where you can hop in and make a difference, whether you're in Chicago or whether you are across the country. We are all, intentional about boys and young men of color and to creating pathways for our young men to be successful, right? Because when our young men show up and are their best selves, we show up as our best selves, right? So I'm just really excited and grateful for what you're doing, Dr. Cross, and however we can support you and your work at Lincoln University, but just what you're doing in general as a Black man leading this work. So just super humbled to be here and just grateful for everything you do, brother.
Man, I really appreciate that, and I really appreciate you taking the time to be here to share with us. And the reason I reached out to you a few years ago is because of your commitment to your work, to make a difference, to make an impact. Because you were part of a program that was producing 100% college ready students. So that was really impressive just to be a part of that environment. So when I see the work that you're a part of, man, I had no other reason or I wanted to connect to what
Absolutely.
you're doing and making an impact for community. So man, so I'm glad that we made a connection, and I'm glad that you continue to do the needed work for community, because as you said, as Black men, we have to show up. We have to let them see what is possible. So man, thank you for being here. But before you go, I have
Yeah.
one more question that I
Let's do
want to ask. What impact do you want to have on the world?
it. I think Jay-Z said it better, legacy, legacy.
That's right.
Honestly, I just hope that it's a little better than what I left it. I'm hoping that I'm able to pour into some brilliant Black and brown young men that will change this world. But more importantly than that, I hope that they clear the path and extend that arm to help bring the next generation up. Obviously, we have a long way to go when we're talking about supports and equity for boys and young men of color across the board, right? We're in the systems change work to be able to, have our young men at the table and to create seats at the table. So it is a long process, but we are excited. We are grateful to be in this work, and just to think that President Obama 8 years ago started this initiative, and we're almost 10, almost right.
That's right.
There are so many initiatives across the world that he could be prioritizing, but he's prioritized this one, right? So it just lets us know that we have to go hard with it, and we have to, of course, listen to the folks that are actually doing the work. So I think that's one of the biggest blessings is to work with so many organizations across the country, particularly here in Chicago, that are committed to doing that work. And however we can connect them, shine a light on them, and support them, we're going to continue to do that. But again, I'm so grateful for you and Lincoln University. I don't know if I ever told you this story, but when I was going into my sophomore year at Mississippi Valley State, I had a hearing where I could possibly be executed, kicked out of the school, right?
Yes.
And Dr. Woolfolk, our former president at Lincoln, was in one of those meetings.
Wow.
And she stood up for me and was like, "No, we will give this young man a second chance."
Yes.
And that second chance ultimately saved and changed my life. So when you reached out on behalf of Lincoln, I was like, "Oh yeah, well that's Dr. Woolfolk and them people. So of course we got to do it." But again, the way you had those young men dressed, the way they showed up, how passionate they were, and also pursuing a career in education too. That's another piece that's so important. We need more Black and brown men to be educators, right? So the way you show up, your students, they admire you, and I admire the work that you're doing, brothers. So however, again, we can support you, we will continue to definitely do that.
Man, thank you. I really appreciate it. But I will say this one thing. We sometimes need a second chance.
Come on.
We sometimes need a second chance. And that's one thing we must not forget. Someone saw something in us and give us the opportunity. So it's on us. When we see someone, we don't just write them off. Say, no, what? I think this person can be. And sometimes just that encouraging word, or that you just say, I believe in you, can change that person's life. So that's important. So Mr. Christopher Crater, thank you for being here on the Black Male Impact. And listeners, if you haven't subscribed yet, please do. We're going to have more interesting conversations to share with you. Mr. Carter, thank you for being here.
It's a pleasure, brother. Thank you so much. And everybody tune in. This brother doing the work, man. Thank you.
Appreciate it.